The sun had barely risen over the bustling town of Zuberi, where ambition and pride often collided like restless waves against the shore. In the heart of its noisy street stood the Golden Brew Café, a place known not for its coffee, but for the people who came to flaunt what they had, or pretend to. Among them was a young woman named Nadia, bold and beautiful, with eyes that could slice through pride but often blinded by her own. She worked at the cafe as a waitress, but in her mind, she was destined for far more, marrying wealth, living luxury, escaping the smallness of her life. That morning, as she adjusted her apron and checked her reflection in the glass, an old man walked in. His clothes were plain, dusty, and worn. An oversized shirt tucked into faded trousers, shoes scuffed from long miles of walking. His hair was white as salt and his back slightly bent, but his eyes, sharp, curious, and calm, saw everything. He approached the counter slowly, his voice quiet but warm. "Good morning, my child. Could I please get a cup of tea? Just plain, no sugar." Nadia raised an eyebrow, eyeing him from head to toe. "This is the Golden Brew, old man. Our cheapest tea costs more than your shoes," she said with a smirk. The other waitresses chuckled under their breath, and a few customers turned to see the spectacle. The old man smiled faintly, unfazed. "I see. Then perhaps a glass of water will do. But one day, young lady, remember that gold can hide in rags." Nadia rolled her eyes. "And I suppose I'm supposed to believe you're some hidden king, huh?" He simply nodded, his smile unwavering. "Something like that." She served him the tea anyway, muttering under her breath, "Useless old man wasting my time." He thanked her softly and sat by the window, sipping slowly while watching the street. As the day passed, more customers arrived. Wealthy men in tailored suits, women with diamond earrings that glittered even under the dim light. Nadia changed her tone instantly, smiling sweetly at them, calling them sir and madam. She ignored the old man completely. But what she didn't notice was how everyone who entered the cafe, every single one of those rich-looking patrons, seemed to glance at the old man with quiet respect. Some even gave him a discreet nod before leaving. Late that afternoon, the cafe owner, Mr. Cato, burst in with his usual thunderous energy. He was known for his temper, but also for his wealth. Rumor said he was one of the richest men in the city, a self-made billionaire who had built his empire from dust. When Nadia saw him, she straightened immediately, plastering on her sweetest smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Your table is ready." But to her shock, Mr. Cato didn't walk to his usual spot. Instead, he went straight to the old man by the window, bowed slightly, and said, "Sir, you shouldn't have come without calling me. I would have sent the car." The entire cafe froze. Nadia's mouth fell open. "Sir, you know him?" she stammered. Mr. Cato chuckled. "Know him? My dear girl, this is Mr. Mandla, the founder of Mandla Holdings, the man who built everything you see in this city, including this cafe." The old man looked up, his calm eyes meeting hers. "We meet again, my child." Nadia felt her knees weaken. "You own this place?" He nodded gently. "Yes, I often visit my businesses disguised, to see the truth, not the smiles people wear for wealth." The cafe went silent, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. The other staff stood frozen, trying not to meet his gaze. Mr. Mandla rose slowly, placing a few crisp bills on the table. "You charged me for tea, but what I wanted was respect. That, my dear, costs nothing, but it shows everything." Nadia's face flushed with shame. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't know." He looked at her kindly. "That's the point. You didn't know. And yet, you chose mockery over kindness." He turned to Mr. Cato. "You have good staff here. But test them not by how they treat you. Test them by how they treat those who seem to have nothing." Then he walked out slowly, leaving the cafe in stunned silence. That evening, Nadia sat alone after her shift, replaying every word he said. The laughter she once used to mask her arrogance now echoed painfully in her mind. She remembered the way he had spoken, softly, humbly, while she had treated him like dirt. A week later, the cafe received news that Mr. Mandla wanted all staff to attend a special meeting at the Mandla Foundation headquarters. Everyone arrived dressed neatly, some trembling in fear. The old man was there again, this time in an elegant navy blue suit that radiated quiet power. Gold cufflinks glinted on his sleeves, and his voice carried a calm authority. He began, "In my years, I've learned that wealth doesn't reveal a person. It exposes them. I've seen men in rags with hearts of kings, and men in suits with souls poorer than dust." Then he looked at Nadia directly. "But I also believe in change." He motioned to the table beside him. On it was a small envelope. "Miss Nadia, come forward." Her heart pounded as she stepped up. He handed her the envelope. Inside was a letter, an invitation to join the Mandla Foundation's hospitality training program. Fully sponsored. "I want you to learn what true service means. Not to money, but to humanity," he said. "If you accept, you'll travel, study, and grow. But if you don't, your lesson ends here." Tears welled in her eyes. "I accept, sir, and I promise I'll never judge someone by their appearance again." He smiled. "Then maybe one day you'll be the one teaching others what kindness truly costs." From that day forward, Nadia transformed. She worked with humility, spoke gently, and helped others rise. Years later, when she became the manager of the Golden Brew, people often whispered that her eyes had softened, that she listened more than she spoke. And sometimes, when an old traveler entered the café, dusty and tired, she would serve him first, with a warm smile and a cup of tea, no charge, because she had learned what most never do, that the richest souls often wear the simplest clothes. One evening, long after closing time, as she cleaned the tables, she noticed an envelope lying by the window seat, the same place where the old man once sat. Inside was a note in the same calm handwriting. "Gold can hide in rags, but light always finds those who choose to see beyond them." She smiled through her tears, whispering, "Thank you, Mr. Mandla." Outside, the night breeze carried the scent of rain and promise, and the lights of Zuberi flickered like stars, each one reminding her that greatness often walks quietly, hidden in plain sight. Nadia stood there holding that note, her fingers trembling as if the paper itself carried some invisible warmth from his hands. She read it again and again until the words seemed to glow in the dim cafe light. A soft wind fluttered the curtains, and for a moment she thought she heard his voice again, calm, wise, and full of that strange mixture of kindness and power that had changed her life forever. She pressed the note to her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered a silent vow that she would never forget the lesson hidden in those simple lines. In the days that followed, Nadia worked harder than ever. She arrived early, stayed late, and treated every customer with genuine respect, no matter how they looked or what they wore. Her colleagues noticed a change. Her tone was softer, her smile sincere. Even the cafe's regulars began to speak differently about her. She wasn't just a pretty waitress anymore. She had become the heart of the Golden Brew. One afternoon, while serving a group of young businessmen, she overheard them mocking an old cleaner sweeping outside. Their laughter rang out, loud and careless, the same way hers once had. Something in her chest tightened. She walked over, her voice steady but firm. "Excuse me," she said. "That man you're laughing at keeps this place clean so you can sit in comfort. Maybe offer him thanks instead of jokes." The young men looked at her, embarrassed. One mumbled an apology. The old cleaner looked up, surprise in his eyes, and nodded to her in quiet gratitude. That night, as Nadia counted the day's earnings, she realized how different it felt to stand for something. She no longer dreamed of marrying wealth or escaping her small life. Instead, she dreamed of earning the kind of respect that didn't come from gold or clothes, but from grace. Weeks passed, and her training at the Mandla Foundation began. It was tougher than she expected. There were lectures on leadership, seminars on ethics, and long discussions about dignity and empathy in business. Most of the students came from rich families, carrying fancy phones and designer bags. Some mocked her simple clothes, but she didn't flinch. She remembered the man in rags who had owned an empire. During one training session, the instructor, a tall, sharp-eyed woman, asked the class a question. "What is the first thing you see when you meet someone?" A boy in a silver watch raised his hand. "Their clothes." "Wrong," the instructor said. "Anyone else?" Another girl said, "Their attitude." "Closer." The instructor nodded. But what you truly see first is how they make you feel. You might forget faces or names, but you never forget the way someone treats you. Nadia's heart stirred. Those words echoed the lesson Mr. Mandla had shown her, not with a lecture, but with silence and grace. After class, the instructor called her aside. "Miss Nadia, Mr. Mandla speaks highly of you. He believes you'll go far." Her eyes widened. You've spoken to him?" The woman smiled. "He checks in on every scholar personally, but he has a special interest in your progress. He says you remind him of himself when he started, proud, hungry, but capable of change." Nadia couldn't find words. She simply nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle deeper in her heart. Months turned into a year. Nadia completed the program with distinction, her reputation spreading quietly through the city's hospitality circles. When she returned to the Golden Brew, it wasn't as a waitress anymore. Mr. Mandla himself had appointed her as the new general manager. The day she took her seat in the small office at the back, she thought about how far she had come from that moment when she mocked an old man with dusty shoes. Under her management, the cafe transformed. She renovated the walls, added a small reading corner, and started a kindness cup initiative, where anyone could pay in advance for a stranger's drink. It became a symbol of community and compassion across Zuberi. Journalists wrote about it. Influencers shared it. But for Nadia, the true reward was watching tired laborers, old widows, and barefoot children enjoy a free cup of tea, smiling without fear of judgment. One rainy morning, as thunder rumbled in the distance, a familiar black car stopped in front of the cafe. Two men in suits stepped out, followed by Mr. Cato. Nadia rushed to greet them, but when the door opened, her breath caught. There he was again, Mr. Mandla, walking slowly but still with that same calm dignity. His face looked older, perhaps more tired, but his eyes held that eternal spark. She bowed deeply. "Sir, you honor us." He chuckled. "I came to see how my little lesson turned out." She smiled. "I hope I've made you proud." He glanced around the cafe, noticing the changes, the warm atmosphere, the photos of staff and customers, the small plaque on the wall that read, "Respect is the richest currency." "You've done more than I imagined," he said softly. "You've turned a business into a home." They sat by the same window where he once drank his tea. Rain streaked the glass as he looked outside. "You see that?" he said, pointing to a young boy sharing a piece of bread with a stray dog. "That's wealth, Nadia. The kind no thief can steal." She nodded, her eyes misty. "You taught me that, sir." He smiled faintly. "No, life did. I was only the messenger." Hours passed as they spoke, about her journey, her dreams, the foundation's work. When he finally stood to leave, he placed a small black notebook on the table. "Read this when you're ready," he said. "It holds the stories of how I built my empire and the mistakes I made along the way. You'll need it if you plan to build something of your own." Before she could thank him, he had already stepped out into the rain, disappearing into the crowd like a shadow returning to light. That night, Nadia opened the notebook. Inside were pages of handwritten reflections, lessons, regrets, memories of betrayals, and victories. But what struck her most was a passage written near the end. "The poor man, I once was building an empire. The rich man, I became almost destroyed it. Only when I remembered humility did I begin to live again." She traced the words with her fingertips, tears rolling down her cheeks. She realized then that her story, the one that began with mockery, was still being written, thread by thread, moment by moment. In the weeks that followed, she began visiting the Mandla Foundation regularly, volunteering to teach new trainees. She told them stories, not about business, but about dignity, how kindness could open doors money never could. She never mentioned the name of the man who had changed her life. She simply referred to him as the old man with golden eyes. And though some thought it was just a tale, those who met her felt the truth in her voice. They saw it in the way she listened, in how she served tea to the humblest visitors first, and in the light that glowed behind her eyes, the kind that only comes from having once been blind and finally learning to see. Every evening, after closing the cafe, she would light a single candle by the window where he once sat. It became her quiet ritual, a tribute to humility, a reminder that wealth without compassion is poverty in disguise. And somewhere in the vast city of Zuberi, under the same rain-streaked sky, an old man in a dark coat would sometimes pause by the street outside the Golden Brew, watching the candle flicker through glass, a faint smile curling beneath his gray beard. The night had deepened, but the Golden Brew glowed like a lantern in the heart of Zuberi. Inside, the candle by the window burned steady and silent. Nadia sat alone, her reflection flickering in the glass, her mind replaying every chapter of her life, from the arrogant waitress who once mocked a stranger to the woman who now carried his legacy in every act of kindness she gave. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the city breathed in calm darkness, unaware that one of its most powerful men was nearing his final goodbye. That same night, far across town in the grand Mandla estate, the old man lay in his vast study, surrounded by the quiet hum of the past. His breathing had grown shallow, his body frail, but his mind wandered freely, back to that day in the Golden Brew, to the look in Nadia's eyes when she first understood humility. A faint smile touched his lips. "Yes," he whispered to the empty room. "She learned the lesson and carried it further than I ever could." At dawn, the call came. When the message reached Nadia, "Mr. Mandla has passed peacefully in his sleep," her world stilled. The paper trembled in her hands as tears blurred the words. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, she whispered the only thing she could. "Rest well, old man. You taught me everything I needed to know." The entire city mourned him. Streets were lined with banners, and people spoke his name with reverence, not because he was rich, but because he had changed lives. Stories emerged of how he had secretly paid for children's education, rebuilt villages after storms, and given second chances to people who thought their lives were over. Each story painted him as both legend and lesson, a man who hid his greatness behind simplicity. But for Nadia, his passing felt personal, as if she had lost not just a mentor, but a father, a guide, a mirror reflecting the best version of herself. The day of the funeral was drenched in silver rain, as if the sky itself mourned. Thousands gathered, business magnates, politicians, farmers, street vendors, all standing side by side. His coffin, draped in white cloth, was placed under a great acacia tree, the same type of tree he had once planted when he first built his empire. When it was Nadia's turn to speak, the crowd fell silent. She stepped forward slowly, her heart pounding, the sound of the rain a quiet drumbeat around her. "I once mocked this man," she began softly. "I thought his rags defined his worth. But he saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. He gave me a lesson that no book or degree could teach, that true power lies not in wealth, but in the heart that shares it." She paused, her eyes glistening. "He taught me that gold can hide in rags, and that a single act of kindness can rewrite a person's entire story, just as he rewrote mine." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some bowed their heads, others wiped tears. Even the wind seemed to still. When the ceremony ended, Nadia remained behind, kneeling by his grave long after everyone had left. She whispered, "You once told me gold hides in rags. But I've learned something more, that kindness never hides. It shines even in darkness. You lit that light in me, and I'll keep it burning." She placed his black notebook beside the flowers on the grave. The pages fluttered in the breeze, revealing the last words he had ever written. "When my time comes, may those I taught outshine me. Then I will know my wealth was never wasted." Years rolled on like gentle tides. The café grew beyond what anyone imagined. What started as a humble corner shop turned into a chain across the country, each branch built with the same values of dignity, warmth, and respect. Yet in every single one by the window, there was always a candle lit for Mr. Mandla. It became a symbol. People from faraway towns came just to see it. Some said the flame never flickered, no matter the weather. Nadia's life transformed, but she never forgot her roots. She used her success to create the Mandla Trust Foundation, helping young people from poor backgrounds learn leadership through compassion. Each year, she visited schools and villages, telling her story, not as a tale of riches and rise, but a mistake that became a miracle. And every time she spoke, she began with the same line. "I once mocked an old man who turned out to be a billionaire in disguise, but the true treasure he left me wasn't money. It was a power to see people for who they are, not what they wear. People listened with open hearts. Some wept, some smiled, some silently vowed to change. Her words carried more than wisdom. They carried truth born from humility. As time went on, Nadia became known as the Lady of the Golden Brew. She wore simple clothes, never showed off her wealth, and treated everyone, from street beggars to ministers, with the same gentle grace. Those who met her said she had the same presence as Mr. Mandla, calm, commanding, and full of quiet strength. One evening, long after closing hours, she sat alone by the window again. The city outside glowed with the soft lights of progress, some of which had been powered by the very businesses Mandla built. The same candle still burned beside her, its flame steady as always. She opened a letter that had been sealed and handed to her years ago, marked only with his handwriting. For Nadia, when you are ready to leave without my shadow. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, there was no speech, no grand advice, just a single line. When gold learns to kneel, it becomes light. A sob broke in her throat. She looked out the night sky, and for a moment, she imagined seeing him there, the old man in his dusty clothes, smiling through the stars. "You're still teaching me," she whispered. Days turned into months, months into years. Her influence spread far and wide, beyond Zuberi, beyond borders. People who had never met her still repeated her favorite saying, "Respect costs nothing, but reveals everything." It became etched on café walls, school gates, and even public buses. The legacy of a man once mocked now lived through a woman who had learned what no university could teach. And yet, the story never truly ended. Every so often, travelers passing through Zuberi would step into Golden Brew and find a small plaque by the window that read, "In memory of a man who wore rags but carried a heart richer than gold." Some claimed they had seen an old man sitting there sometimes, quietly sipping tea, vanishing the moment they looked again. The staff would smile and say softly, "That's just the spirit of the founder," checking if we're still treating everyone right. Years later, when Nadia's own hair had turned silver, she would still walk in the cafe every morning, touch the candle, and whisper a silent prayer. The flame always greeted her like an old friend. And though the world changed, technology, wealth, fashion, the core lesson remained unshaken, carried in hearts across generations. Because stories like hers never die. They evolve, whispered from one humble soul to another. And in every whisper, the message endured, that kindness seen through humility can outlive even empires. That sometimes the richest man you'll ever meet hides behind tattered clothes, waiting not for your money but your respect.